They were a loving couple living the American dream.
They came to America seeking stability, seeking success.
They really had to hustle and work hard.
They made a better life for themselves.
Until a horrible crime destroyed everything they held dear.
Get out of my house.
Somebody's in the house.
She can hear her husband. He's screaming.
This was a really traumatizing situation.
He was badly beaten.
There's a lot of blood.
This had to be her worst nightmare.
Was the horrific attack a home invasion?
Someone jimmied the locks.
The house looks ransacked.
Or does this happy couple have deadly secrets?
Someone was skimming money from the landscaping business.
You started to hear about affairs.
It was a casual fling.
They said that was the motive for murder.
December 29th, 2009. It's the dead of night in Lithonia, Georgia, a peaceful community 30 miles east of Atlanta.
Lithonia is a small country town turned bedroom community.
It's a quiet place where people come to buy a home and get away from the city.
But even in the sleepiest suburb, safety isn't guaranteed.
At 2 a.m., the cab 911 received a frantic phone call from a homeowner.
The caller is 48-year-old Pamela Ballin.
Cab County 911.
It's like somebody's in the house.
She heard ransacking throughout the house. Lots of loud noises, things falling, things being broken.
Tell me, where are you at in the house now?
Closet.
You're in the closet?
But a panicked Pamela tells the dispatcher that she's terrified for her husband, 53-year-old Ricky Ballin.
Where's your husband at, ma'am?
I don't know, right?
She said she heard her husband fighting with an intruder.
Somebody was hitting on him.
She also hears him say, "Gun, get a gun, get a gun."
But scared for her life, Pamela instead hid in the closet to call for help.
Do you still hear voices in the house?
But Pamela tells the dispatcher she does hear someone.
What did you hear?
My husband calling for me.
Her husband was downstairs calling for help.
I should go downstairs.
No, ma'am. Just stay where you are.
Originally from the island of Jamaica, Pamela and Ricky Ballin came to America in 1984.
They'd just gotten married and were excited to start a family together.
They decided it would be best to migrate to America.
Like a lot of immigrants, Pamela and Ricky had to hustle to establish themselves.
They settled in Lithonia, a quiet suburb of Atlanta, which seemed like the perfect place to raise a family.
Pamela was able to find a job as a travel agent. And then Ricky, he was basically taking any job that he could get his hands on.
It was a constant scramble to make ends meet. But the couple was determined to build a better life for themselves and their children.
Derek Jr. had been born shortly after the family arrived in the States.
Ricky also had an older son named David from a previous relationship.
Although born in Jamaica, David was living in Boston with his mom.
He was able to come down for summers to visit with his father, Ricky, his stepmother, and his younger brother.
And by the time they were teenagers, both boys were busy helping their father.
Ricky had always dreamed of owning his own business, and before long, he had established his own landscaping company.
It was small to begin with, but Ricky really hustled hard.
He did quality work and had a great reputation.
And as suburban Atlanta boomed, so did Ricky's business.
More houses meant more yards needed landscaping, and Ricky was right on it.
Before long, Ricky was able to buy more moors He hired workers to add additional trucks and crews and was able to bid on much larger projects.
His business began to really take off.
Eventually, they were able to enjoy all of the benefits of middle-class success.
The couple bought a big, beautiful home.
They were able to live well, send their kids to good schools, travel.
All the while, Ricky's business kept growing.
The projects were getting bigger and bigger.
Ricky found himself landing six-figure commercial landscaping contracts.
Pamela quit her job and she joined her husband's company.
Ricky and Pamela really worked well together as a team.
Ricky was the front man who was out there handling the crews and handling the projects. Pamela was behind the scenes handling the books and helping to run the business.
And by 2009, the Ballins were an American success story.
Ricky and Pamela were proud of what they had built together.
But now a horrific crime threatens to tear it all apart. On December 29, 2009, Lithonia 911 has just received a terrified call from Pamela.
Pamela had just called 911 to report what sounded like a break-in.
She can hear what sounds like a struggle happening downstairs. Her husband fighting with the intruder.
Even more terrifying, Pam says she can hear Ricky calling out for help.
He thinks I should go downstairs to my
No,
husband.
ma'am.
The dispatcher warns her that the intruder may still be in the house.
Wait until the officer clears the location.
That had to be so terrifying for her, knowing something is going on with her husband and not being able to respond or react for fear of something happening to her.
She spends a majority of the 911 call pleading with the dispatcher to allow her to go check on him.
I need to go downstairs.
Stay where you are.
After several agonizing minutes, police arrive on the scene.
The front door was locked, and despite the situation, officers didn't break it down.
Then after urging her to stay put, the dispatcher asked her to go downstairs to let in the police.
Stay on the phone with me and go and get the door.
Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Still on the line with the operator, Pamela heads downstairs.
She breaks down completely as she lets the officers inside.
The police find Ricky lying on the foyer floor.
There's a lot of blood. It's just a total mess.
It's a wife's worst nightmare.
With a successful landscaping business and a beautiful suburban home, immigrants Ricky and Pamela Ballin were an American success story.
By the end of 2009, Ricky and Pamela were really proud of what they had accomplished.
It wasn't easy. It required a lot of hard work, but they had built a life here in America.
Only now their American dream has turned into a nightmare.
Pamela just called 911 to report what sounds like a burglary in progress.
She believed Ricky had tried to fight off the intruder.
As she went downstairs to let the officers in, she saw her husband's bloody body lying next to the front door.
Ricky's badly beaten, and he's bleeding profusely from the head.
Imagine going downstairs and seeing your husband almost near to death.
Once Pamela's safely outside, officers sweep the house for the intruder.
The intruder apparently left the scene, but the house is ransacked.
Once the house was cleared, EMTs transport Ricky to the hospital.
Ricky was in really bad shape. He was non-communicative.
He is clinging to life.
As they load him into the ambulance, Pamela tries to climb on board, too.
Pamela was insistent that she get inside.
But detectives arrived on the scene, and they asked Pamela to wait to give them a statement.
Look, ma'am, I know you want to go be with your husband, but we really need to.
She was on the scene when the break-in occurred. So unless Ricky survives, she's their best witness.
I'll do what I can, but I really didn't see anything.
They asked her a lot of questions. She was cooperative.
According to Pamela, the night started off unexceptionally.
She said she had gotten home from the gym. Ricky was sitting in his favorite chair, surfing the internet.
You coming up to bed?
I'll be up in a minute.
Okay, I'm gonna go get that shower.
Pam said Ricky was still in his chair when she went upstairs.
She went to shower and she went to bed.
But Pamela says she woke up around 2 a.m.
She didn't know why she'd woken up, but when she did, Ricky wasn't in bed.
That was not unusual for him, because he kept real late hours. He liked to watch TV.
Once awake, Pamela says she'd gotten up and gone to the bathroom.
She's in there for a while when she starts hearing sounds.
What kind of sounds?
Sounds like something moving around downstairs.
Someone other than Ricky.
She says she heard Ricky say to someone, "Who are you? What are you doing here?"
That made her believe that there was an intruder in the house.
And according to Pamela, what Ricky said next erased any doubt.
She says she heard Ricky yell up to her to go get the gun.
Ricky wanted me to get the gun. He keeps it in the nightstand by the bed.
But you didn't get it?
No, I was too afraid.
She tearfully admitted that she should have gotten the gun, but she was too afraid.
She instead locked herself in the bedroom.
Pamela says that as she huddled in the bathroom, Ricky had apparently tried to fight off the intruder.
Pam said that that's when she heard the crashing and the banging downstairs, like there was some kind of struggle.
She said she wasn't entirely sure how long she had stayed hidden in the bathroom.
It could have been 2 minutes, it could have been 10 minutes. She was too terrified to note.
I was too afraid, thinking they were gonna come up there and find me. They? So there was more than one intruder? I don't know, maybe?
She says that she heard ransacking throughout the house. Lots of loud noises, things falling, things being broken.
Until, according to Pamela, the noises suddenly stopped.
She heard it get quiet downstairs, and she thought that that was an opportunity to dash to the bedroom, get the phone, and call 911.
Even though she didn't hear anyone, Pamela was scared the intruders were still in the house, so she hid in the closet and called for help.
Pamela says it was while on the phone with 911 that she heard a new, horrifying sound.
She can hear Ricky faintly calling out for her.
Pam begins desperately pleading with the dispatcher to allow her to go check on her husband.
Ricky was calling for me, and I told her I should go down there and help him.
But the dispatcher says, "No, stay where you are, where it's safe."
She said she hadn't gone back downstairs until the police arrived.
She saw Ricky lying on the foyer floor.
I should have came down sooner.
She feels very guilty.
In hindsight, she should have gotten the gun, but she was too afraid.
It was a traumatic situation, to be sure.
This must have been her worst nightmare.
And it was about to get worse.
Just as Pamela was finishing her statement, the detectives got an urgent call from the hospital.
I should have came down sooner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Pam, you need to go to the hospital.
Oh my God.
If she wants to see Ricky one last time, she better get to the hospital.
According to research released by the U.S. Department of Justice, there are an estimated 2.5 million burglaries nationwide each year. Of these, 66% are home invasions, but only 13% lead to an arrest due to lack of witnesses or physical evidence. While talking to detectives about the apparent home invasion and vicious assault on her husband, Ricky, Pamela Ballin has just received horrific news.
Pam learns that if she wants to see Ricky one last time, she has to get to the hospital immediately.
A neighbor drives the distraught Pamela to Atlanta's Grady Memorial Hospital.
Grady is the premier trauma center in the region. Grady has a reputation for saving people.
But there's nothing they can do for Ricky.
When Pamela arrives at the hospital, she receives notice that there's no hope for Ricky's recovery.
Ricky was struck in the head with a blunt object. He's essentially brain dead.
He could survive indefinitely on life support, but he will never regain consciousness.
When Pamela and Ricky's son, Derek Jr., arrive at the hospital, he and his mother face a difficult choice.
Pam knew that quality of life was really important. And at that moment, she had to decide whether or not she would make her husband live an existence that wasn't consistent with the man that he was, just for her sake, because she wanted him around. And she chose to let him go.
It wasn't just Pamela's decision, it was Pamela and their adult son's decision to ask that no further resuscitative means be utilized.
For detectives at the crime scene, it means their investigation will soon be upgraded to a homicide. And the evidence points to a likely motive.
Based on the scene, police were thinking that this started out as a robbery.
The house was ransacked.
There was furniture everywhere, drawers poured out.
Pictures hanging off the wall, broken glass pieces on the floor.
The Christmas tree was turned over.
They also found blood spatter all throughout the first floor, so it looks like there was a knockdown, drag-out struggle.
In the foyer, near where the killer left Ricky for dead, detectives also find what they believe to be the murder weapon.
Not far from the foyer, there was a decorative statue that was smeared with blood, and it appeared heavy enough and solid enough to have caused Ricky's injuries.
Finally, at the back of the house, detectives find where the intruders apparently made entry.
They find pry marks on the back door.
The intruder apparently jimmied the lock.
It appeared the person had planned to slip in and out quietly while everyone was asleep.
They didn't expect anyone to be downstairs.
Based on all the signs, his death appears to be the result of a burglary gone wrong.
Except there's one thing that doesn't add up.
Nothing appears to be missing.
The TV, the jewelry, the cash, the valuables, they were still there in plain sight.
Which naturally raises questions for detectives.
Had the killer or the thieves lost their nerve? Or had the crime scene been staged to look like a robbery to cover Ricky's murder?
Looking for answers, police canvass the area and speak with the Ballins' neighbors.
The neighbors are obviously upset and scared because things like this don't happen in this type of neighborhood.
Did you see or hear?
Lithonia, the crime rate is considerably low comparing to Atlanta, Fulton County, or Gwinnett County.
Neighbors were especially horrified that something like this had happened to the Ballins.
Everyone the detective spoke with said that Pamela and Ricky were nice neighbors and a great couple.
People knew them as hardworking people. They were nice people and were very shocked that this happened.
Neighbors have no idea who would want to hurt Ricky.
Nor had anyone witnessed anything suspicious in the neighborhood that night.
No one has heard anything. No one saw anything.
Although one neighbor says she did observe something odd recently.
One neighbor said that she noticed a strange vehicle, a black SUV, parked across from the Ballins' home on several occasions.
She said it was almost as if someone was watching the Ballins' house.
The detectives wondered if Ricky was having trouble with someone that the neighbors might not have known about.
Could he have been in debt to someone? Was he dealing with a disgruntled employee? Or really, it could be anyone.
As the sun rises and detectives head back to the station, it isn't long before they get the news they've been anticipating.
At about 10 a.m. that morning, Ricky dies.
With the clock ticking now to find Ricky's murderer, investigators waste no time inviting Pamela down to the station to give a formal statement.
Coming in, I know this is a difficult time for you.
Pamela was still very upset, and she seems shocked that anyone would want to break in their home and harm Ricky.
I thought this was just a burglary.
Well, that's what we're trying to find out.
Pamela told detectives that as far as she knew, Ricky didn't have any enemies.
Was he having any problems with the business?
No.
However, there's one other possibility that detectives will need to rule out.
They started asking her questions about whether she had been seeing anyone, whether Ricky had been seeing anyone. A lot of personal questions.
No, everything was fine.
Pamela also says she has no idea who might be in the black SUV a neighbor spotted lurking around the house in the days leading up to the murder.
No, I don't know anything about that.
But while Pamela's statement offers no new leads for detectives,
Hi, Derek.
Pamela and Ricky's son, Derek Jr.'s, does.
There's something about my dad y'all probably need to know about.
He says that detectives should talk to his dad's girlfriend.
His girlfriend?
Yeah. He tells authorities that his father had been having an affair.
Pamela and Ricky Ballin's son, Derek Jr., has just revealed to detectives that his father may have been having an affair at the time of his death.
According to his son, the woman that his dad had been having an affair with was an Atlanta woman by the name of Carolyn Hodges.
She's an old family friend that Ricky had run into at a family funeral.
How do you know he was having an affair?
He wasn't exactly discreet.
Derek says that he overheard his dad chatting with the woman on the phone on several occasions.
Now, did your mom know about his girlfriend?
I tried to tell her.
Derek Jr. told police that his mom didn't believe it and didn't want to hear it.
The detectives are definitely interested, though.
Maybe the mistress was angry that Ricky wasn't giving her what she wanted.
All right, I'll walk you out.
Attempting to confirm whether Ricky was truly having an affair, investigators pull his phone records.
What they discover is several late-night phone calls that trace back to Carolyn Hodges.
There was even a phone call the night of the incident between Ricky and this woman.
However, when detectives bring Caroline in for questioning, she says that was no affair.
She says that she and Ricky were merely old friends.
She admits that her and Ricky did talk on the phone quite often. She said it was just catching up at first, and ultimately it led to Ricky talking to her because he wanted her advice.
Advice about what?
Well, he and Pam were going through a rough patch.
What did you say?
According to Caroline, it was Pam, not Ricky, who had been having the affair.
She said that Ricky found out he just didn't know what to do about it.
No.
Caroline says that Pam's boyfriend was a police officer named Antonio Vargas.
According to Carolyn, Antonio and Pam go to the same gym. And when Ricky found out about the affair, he was very upset.
But she says he also blamed himself.
He had been so focused on his business and working long hours.
I told him talk to Pam about it.
Well, did he follow your advice?
Yes.
Ricky had confronted Pam about the affair, and she had broken things off with Vargas.
Her and Ricky had reconciled and were going to do their best to make the most of it.
If Caroline's telling the truth, detectives see a few possibilities.
Vargas was angry about the breakup. Did he possibly seek revenge by killing Ricky?
Or maybe Pam hadn't really ended things with Vargas.
Maybe they were plotting together to remove Ricky from the picture so that they could be together.
Or could the most likely scenario be that Caroline was pointing the finger at Pam to throw detectives off her track?
Maybe she wanted to be more than friends with Ricky and gotten angry when he rejected her.
However, a quick check of Caroline's phone records rules her out as a suspect.
According to her cell phone records, she had called Ricky from her sister's house in North Carolina.
There's no way that she could have committed the crime.
What's more, it appears there may be something to Caroline's story about Antonio Vargas.
They determined that he owned an SUV that was similar to the SUV that neighbors reported that was lurking in the neighborhood.
Was it possible that Vargas had been scoping out the scene?
But if that was the case, why didn't Pamela say anything when detectives brought it up with her? When investigators bring Antonio in for questioning, he doesn't deny the affair.
We just met at the gym. You know, one thing leads to another.
He said she felt neglected by her husband, so he was more than happy to step in.
You still seeing her?
Nah, we just hooked up a few times.
He characterizes it as just a fling.
He says that he really didn't care whether or not she reconciled with her husband.
That's when investigators confront him about the black SUV.
Then why are you hanging around her place?
What are you talking about?
He denies that it was his SUV in the neighborhood.
Look, if an SUV looks like mine, it's just a coincidence.
Antonio also denies having anything to do with Ricky's death.
When he was asked what he was doing the night of the murder, he said he was working.
A quick check with the Atlanta police appears to confirm Antonio's alibi.
He was on duty at the time of the murder and had answered a call a half hour away from the crime scene.
They ruled him out as a suspect.
It looks as if the investigation is at a dead end. Until Ricky's son, David, arrives from Boston with new information for detectives.
There's something you ought to know.
Well, tell us.
He tells the detectives that his father was furious over the fact that she was skimming money from the landscaping business.
David says it all started when his father asked Pamela to take over running things in the office.
He preferred to be physically on the job site and doing the hands-on work.
However, according to David, trouble soon surfaced.
When he did check the books, he noticed what he thought were some irregularities.
You talked to her about it? Yeah.
David stated his stepmom assured Ricky that it was no big deal. She just had different ways of doing things than what he was used to.
David said that his father had bought Pam's excuses at first.
David says that things eventually came to a head when his dad started having trouble paying the company's bills and meeting payroll.
Hey, this doesn't make sense. What's going on with the money?
Ricky, I've told you where the money is going.
I can't even pay the employees.
David said his dad was so upset that he was about to open up a separate bank account that Pam wouldn't have access to.
According to David, Ricky was so fed up, he was ready to file for divorce.
Well, do you know who was handling your dad's divorce?
Well, I'm not sure he'd gotten that far.
Ricky had not filed for divorce or actually reached out to an attorney. The detectives only had David's word for it.
But when police start digging deeper into the Ballins' marriage, they discover that Pamela may have had a bigger motive than anyone imagined.
There was a life insurance policy with Pamela as the beneficiary.
Shortly before his murder, Ricky had drastically increased his life insurance coverage.
Pamela stood to gain more than $1 million from her husband's death.
DeKalb County detectives have just discovered that Pamela Ballin may have had a powerful motive to murder her husband, Ricky.
Prior to Ricky's murder, his life insurance policy had been drastically increased.
Pamela stood to gain more than $1 million from her husband's death.
The landscaping business, their big, beautiful home, all of their assets, and everything that they owned would be hers and hers alone.
But according to her stepson, David, the window for Pamela to collect had been closing fast.
According to David, Ricky was ready to file for divorce.
But before he could even file for a divorce or consult a lawyer, he was murdered.
Did that mean Pamela had killed him? Detectives suspect that's the case, but they have little proof.
There was no forensic evidence tying Pamela to the murder.
With their hands tied, detectives bring Pamela back into the station. this time to confront her with her lies.
With no other leads and no other suspects, they hoped to pry a confession out of her.
Why did you lie to us about the affair?
Because it was over. My husband just died, and I didn't see any reason for airing out our dirty laundry.
The detectives also pressed Pamela about the $1 million insurance policy.
Well, why did you increase the insurance policy?
That was not my idea.
She said this is something that they did jointly.
Still, the detectives keep pressing.
They questioned her for hours.
Come on, Pam. You did it. And then you tried to make it look like a break-in.
Detective, I would never hurt Ricky.
She stuck to her story that this was actually a home invasion.
But the fact that Pamela won't crack makes no difference to detectives.
At the end of the interview, they placed Pam under arrest for murder.
There were just too many inconsistencies in her version of events for detectives to ignore.
News of Pam's arrest stuns the couple's neighbors.
This appeared to be a perfect couple.
It was really hard for people to wrap their mind around the fact that Pam could do something so heinous.
But as you started to hear about affairs and you started to hear about skimming, some people thought, could she have done it?
When the case goes to trial in June of 2014, the prosecutors begin by arguing that Pamela was the only person with a clear motive to kill her husband.
A pending divorce, a life insurance policy of more than $1 million. They said that was the motive for murder.
They maintained that Pamela Ballin was a woman who was looking to get out of a marriage that she was no longer happy in. The fact that she'd had an affair, and that she would get the spoils of the business if her husband was no longer around.
So, according to the prosecutors, Pamela had killed her husband in cold blood.
Prosecutors alleged that Ricky was asleep in his recliner on the first floor of the couple's home.
Pam crept up as he slept.
She was armed with a statue she'd grabbed off a nearby table.
There was no struggle. Ricky was incapacitated after the first blow.
Once he was down, she dragged her dying husband into the foyer.
Then, as her husband lay dying in the foyer, Pamela faked a home invasion.
They were painting a good picture for the jury that this was a scene that appeared to be staged.
Prosecutors focused on the fact that while the house appeared to be ransacked, no valuables seemed to, and there was very little damage to any of their possessions.
The stage set. Prosecutors claimed that Pamela had cleaned herself and then placed a carefully rehearsed call to 911.
She proceeded to give the performance of a lifetime.
When it's the defense's turn, Pamela's attorney claims that the prosecution's case is pure speculation.
Prosecution's theory sounded good, but they had no real proof.
There was simply no evidence to indicate that these two individuals were at the cusp of a divorce, and certainly no divorce that was pending at the time, and no evidence to support that assertion other than some hearsay.
What you working on, babe?
The defense also pushes back on the notion that Pamela was after Ricky's money.
They called an accountant to the stand, and he said he viewed the books, and he found no evidence that Pam had been skimming money from the company.
Pamela wasn't taking any money from the business wasn't losing any money. There was simply nothing to support that assertion. And that's all it was an assertion. You know, there were statements given by folks who thought that this was the reason that Pamela and Ricky were not getting along, and there simply wasn't any evidence to support it. And the books, the paperwork, and the testimony of the accountant himself disproved that.
Most of all, according to the defense, the prosecution's entire theory was based on a false assumption.
The most devastating blow to the prosecutor's case is when the defense brought the insurance agent to the stand
The insurance agent testified that he was the person who had actually suggested that the policy be increased. They could have gotten more coverage under a different policy, and it made sense to him, and it ultimately made sense to Pamela and to Ricky, who agreed to have the policy increased. So this theory that this was a murder for insurance money just didn't really hold any water.
In fact, the defense is so confident that they destroy the prosecution's arguments that they ask the judge to dismiss the case.
It's called a directed verdict of acquittal.
In a shocking blow to the prosecution, the judge decides to consider it.
He said, I'm going to take it under advisement.
But not before he hears the jury's verdict first.
He wanted the case to go to the jury.
After the jury made their decision, the judge would decide whether to accept the verdict or throw it out.
We don't believe there's enough evidence for this case to even go to the jury. Now, we asked for it to be dismissed. The judge didn't do it. He didn't rule on it. He said, I'm going to hold off on ruling on that, which is very odd. Now, my opinion, having practiced for 20-some-odd years, is that the judge thought that she was going to be acquitted. And he didn't want to be the one to make the decision. He wanted the jury to go ahead and acquit her.
53-year-old Pamela Ballin's murder trial has just taken an unprecedented turn.
Pam had been accused of killing her husband, Ricky, in order to collect his $1 million life insurance policy.
The defense was so sure the prosecution had not proved its case, they asked the judge to throw out the charges.
The judge decided to wait and to defer to the jury's ruling before he made any decisions.
When they heard his decision, the defense and Pamela's family thought that the judge was expecting an acquittal.
Would they be mistaken?
After a significant amount of deliberation, the jury came back and they found Pamela guilty.
Pam's family was totally blindsided and could not understand how the jury arrived at that decision.
On the other hand, Ricky's family and supporters were very pleased with the jury's decision. They thought they got it right.
Now the question is whether the judge will abide by their decision.
He still had the option of throwing out the case and the guilty verdict.
When the jury came back and found her guilty, he was just as surprised as we were.
Although it became apparent that he was in no hurry to make his decision.
The judge decided he needed a month to decide whether or not to toss out the case.
I honestly believe that the court simply thought that the jury got it wrong, notwithstanding the jury verdict, and set Pamela free. The court allowed Miss Ballin to go home.
Pam was released on bond and would remain free until the judge came back with a decision.
This time, it's Ricky's family who were blindsided and outraged.
It's just a slap in the face for the whole family.
She walked out the courtroom just like we did.
I feel like he was just killed all over again. That's how I felt, because we didn't get justice.
Ricky's family gave interviews to the television news reporters, proclaiming how the judge had allowed a murderer to go free.
As far as they were concerned, Pamela shouldn't be out walking the streets.
The prosecutors are just as livid.
The DA is so upset by this that in just a few days, he's able to make a motion to have Pam brought back into custody pending the judge's decision on the motion.
There was so much commotion, there was so much made of it, that ultimately the judge had Miss Ballin come back in.
But would she soon be out again? It all comes down to the judge's decision.
Pam's family, friends, and attorney are all confident that Pam will be freed once the judge makes his ruling. But it's their turn to be outraged once again when the judge affirms the jury's verdict of murder.
The judge ultimately sentenced her on a murder charge.
And since she was found guilty of murder, there was only one sentence the judge can hand down.
Georgia doesn't have degrees of murder. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
The outcome is a startling reversal for Pamela and her family, one they refuse to accept.
We filed an appeal. We filed what's called a motion for new trial. Another judge looked at that motion for new trial and decided that there were irregularities, that she had not been fairly tried, and the case was overturned.
She was granted a new trial in 2017.
At this point, the prosecution knows what the defense's arguments are. And so they tried a different case. It was a more emotional case. Pamela testified, whereas she did not in the first trial. Ultimately, I believe the jury made their decision in that second trial upon whether they found Pamela to be credible or not. I don't believe they did. And that second jury found her guilty.
For Ricky's family, it was a hard-earned victory.
The right person is behind bars. The right person was implicated for his murder.
Meanwhile, Pamela's supporters remain just as convinced she has suffered a great injustice.
You're never going to be able to convince me that Pamela Ballin murdered Ricky Ballin.
Although no matter who killed Pamela's husband, there's one thing everyone agrees on.
Ricky did not deserve to die this way.
This was a loving father, a man who people said was universally admired for his hard work. Starting from nothing, he made the American dream come true, only to lose it in the most horrible way.
It's really an all-around tragedy for everybody involved.
Content of her final note referencing an accident. However, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a verdict of guilty for first-degree murder. On July 13, 2006, Denise Miller was sentenced to 62 years in state prison. Chapter 3: Smoke over Houston. In the spring of 2007, 19-year-old Tanisha Stewart was a bright and ambitious freshman at Texas A&M University. Raised in a close-knit family in Houston, Tanisha had overcome early hardship, including the loss of her father, through academic diligence. Her warmth, natural beauty, and intellect made her a standout student with unlimited potential. In May 2005, while working at a local pizza restaurant at age 17, Tanisha met 25-year-old Tim Shepard. Despite an 8-year age difference, the two began dating. Tim made significant efforts to win over Tanisha's family, assisting with household repairs and presenting himself as a supportive, mature partner. However, as Tanisha transitioned to college life in late 2006, her world expanded. She developed greater independence, built new friendships, and began to distance herself from Tim's increasingly controlling behavior. Although their relationship became intermittent, Tim struggled to accept her growing autonomy. He made unannounced visits to the university campus and exhibited intense jealousy whenever she failed to answer his calls promptly. During spring break in March 2007, Tanisha returned home to Houston. While she maintained casual contact with Tim, her primary focus was spending time with family and friends, including attending an upcoming concert. She had also begun dating a fellow college student named Mark Marks. On the morning of Thursday, March 15, 2007, Tanisha vanished. By Sunday, March 18, 2007, after Tanisha failed to attend the concert or contact her family, an unprecedented break from her normal habits. Her sister Gayla and mother filed a missing persons report with law enforcement. Investigators questioned Tim Shepard, who was among the last people to see her. Tim claimed he had picked Tanisha up at 3 o'clock on Thursday morning. He stated that while at his apartment, Tanisha received an early morning phone call from Mark Marks, sparking a heated argument. Tim claimed Tanisha refused to discuss the matter and walked out of his apartment on foot later that morning, leaving him with no knowledge of her whereabouts. Detectives also interrogated Mark Marks, who cooperated fully and provided a verified alibi, establishing that he was out of town on South Padre Island with friends at the time of Tanisha's disappearance. As the missing persons search expanded, neighbors in Tim Shepard's apartment complex approached officers with highly unusual observations. Residents reported that beginning Friday, March 16th, Tim had engaged in continuous, heavy, outdoor grilling that lasted throughout the weekend. The smoke was so dense that neighbors called the fire department, fearing a building fire. When firefighters arrived, Tim claimed he was preparing large quantities of meat for a church picnic. A firefighter noted seeing large amounts of uncooked meat soaking in a bathtub inside the apartment. Additionally, neighbors observed Tim scrubbing his outdoor patio with pure bleach, creating fumes so severe that nearby residents experienced eye irritation. Convinced that Tim held the key to Tanisha's disappearance, the family enlisted the help of community activist Quan Nellex. On Wednesday, March 21st, 2007, Quan Nellex met privately with Tim inside the bathroom of Tim's apartment. During their emotional conversation, Tim broke down and confessed to killing Tanisha. He admitted that when Tanisha refused to break off her relationship with Mark Marks and attempted to leave the apartment, he flew into a rage and strangled her to death. Tim stated that he had placed her body in a commercial dumpster behind the complex. Quan Nellex immediately notified lead investigator Sidney Miller. Law enforcement officers, accompanied by Quan Nellex and Tim Shepard, rushed to the designated dumpster, only to find it completely empty. Sanitation services had cleared the container earlier that day, transporting the waste to a massive regional landfill. A search of the landfill was deemed logistically impossible. Upon his formal arrest, Tim invoked his right to legal counsel and refused further statements. To secure a murder conviction without an intact body, crime scene investigators conducted a meticulous forensic examination of Tim's apartment, patio, and grilling equipment. The physical evidence recovered was definitive. Analysts recovered human tooth enamel from inside the apartment's garbage disposal unit. Forensic testing identified the enamel as belonging to Tanisha Stewart. Furthermore, investigators recovered charred bone fragments adjacent to the patio grill. The physical evidence, combined with the testimony of firefighters and neighbors, established a horrific reality. Tim had dismembered and burned Tanisha's remains in an attempt to destroy all physical evidence of his crime. Tim Shepard was formally indicted for first-degree murder. His trial commenced on September 29, 2008, in Harris County, Texas. Prosecutors outlined the overwhelming circumstantial and forensic proof. They presented the tooth enamel recovered from the disposal, the charred bone, fragments, the excessive bleach cleaning, and the eyewitness accounts of his continuous grilling. Quannell X testified regarding Tim's voluntary confession. Additionally, Tim's cousin, Nicholas Shepard, took the witness stand and revealed that Tim had previously made dark threats, stating that if Tanisha ever attempted to leave him, he would kill her, dismember her, and burn her body. During the penalty phase, Tim took the stand in his own defense, attempting to claim he had acted in self-defense after Tanisha allegedly brandished a knife. During their argument, however, under sharp cross-examination, Tim admitted to placing her dismembered remains into a smoker, revealing a complete lack of remorse. On October 2nd, 2008, the jury found Tim Shepard guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 99 years in state prison. Epilogue: The triumph of truth. When we examine the tragic trajectories of Latrice Curtis, Officer Wayne Irby, and Tanisha Stewart, a consistent and sobering pattern emerges. In each instance, the perpetrator mistook control for devotion and possessiveness for love. Pastor Robert Reeves, hiding behind a cloak of religious authority, allowed an unhinged obsession to drive him to brutal murder. Denise Miller, consumed by insecure jealousy, executed the man who sought a peaceful departure from a volatile bond. Tim Shepard, unable to tolerate a young woman's growth and independence, committed an act of astounding savagery to deny her a future without him. Yet the ultimate legacy of these cases does not belong to the perpetrators serving out their long years in prison. It belongs to the dedicated investigators, forensic specialists, and vigilant citizens who refuse to let dark secrets remain hidden in the shadows. Through relentless procedural rigor, scientific precision, and moral courage, justice was delivered. These stories stand as enduring reminders of the vital importance of personal boundaries, emotional self-awareness, and the absolute sanctity of human life. True love creates freedom, nurtures potential, and respects autonomy, where coercion, fear, and possessiveness take root. Tragedy is never far behind. By honoring the memory of those who were lost, society reaffirms its unwavering commitment to truth, empathy, and the rule of law. Act 1. Shadows over spring break. The human heart possesses an extraordinary capacity to harbor contradictory truths. It can cultivate immense ambition while clinging to comforting illusions. It can nurture deep devotion while quietly harboring the seeds of possessiveness. In the sprawling metropolis of Houston, Texas, where urban highways stretch toward wide southern horizons, two young lives intersected in a quiet pizza restaurant in May of 2005. On the surface, it appeared to be an ordinary meeting between two colleagues working customer service shifts. In reality, it was the beginning of a complex emotional narrative that would eventually unravel into a dark cautionary tale. Tanisha Stewart was, by every account provided by those who knew her best, a bright and shining star, raised in one of Houston's most economically challenged neighborhoods. Tanisha had faced adversity early in life. She suffered the tragic loss of her father when she was still very young, leaving her mother to raise 6 children in an environment where hardship was a daily reality. Yet, Tanisha possessed a resilience that set her apart. She viewed education not merely as a requirement, but as a vehicle for self-determination. Her academic performance was stellar. She approached her books with a quiet, unwavering seriousness that signaled to her family that she was destined for great accomplishments. In addition to her intellectual discipline, Tanisha was blessed with natural grace and an infectious smile that naturally drew people toward her. As she grew into a young woman, she had no shortage of suitors. However, Tanisha was not easily impressed by standard pleasantries or superficial charm. She sought depth. She wanted to be challenged by someone who possessed maturity and purpose. Enter Timothy Shepard. At 25 years of age, Timothy was 8 years older than 17-year-old Tanisha when they first crossed paths while working at the pizza establishment. Handsome, soft-spoken, and presenting himself as a steadying presence, Timothy began pursuing Tanisha with persistent charm. Initially hesitant due to her focus on her studies, Tanisha eventually agreed to go out with him. What began as casual conversations between coworkers gradually blossomed into a serious, intimate relationship. For a young woman who had grown up without a paternal figure, Timothy appeared to embody multiple roles simultaneously. He was an attentive partner, but he also presented himself as a protective, mature mentor. Timothy made deliberate efforts to integrate himself into Tanisha's family life. He visited her mother's home frequently, offering to repair broken television sets, configure computers, and assist with household chores. To Tanisha's mother, sister, and brothers, Timothy appeared to be a polite, helpful young man who cared deeply for Tanisha. They embraced him almost as another family member. However, beneath this helpful demeanor, subtle dynamic shifts were beginning to form. When an individual who is significantly older enters a romantic relationship with a teenager, the implicit power balance often tilts subtly toward the older partner. For a time, while Tanisha was still in high school, this balance remained stable. But life is inherently dynamic, and Tanisha's trajectory was moving rapidly upward. In the spring of 2006, Tanisha achieved a major milestone. She earned a scholarship to Texas Agricultural and Mechanical University. The transition to university life in College Station, located approximately 2 hours north of Houston, represented far more than a simple geographic relocation. It marked Tanisha's entry into a broader world of higher education, diverse social circles, and independent critical thinking. Despite the distance, Tanisha remained committed to preserving her relationship. With Timothy, she made frequent trips home to Houston and maintained regular phone contact. However, only 3 months into her freshman year, the relationship suffered a major rupture. Timothy rekindled a romance with a former girlfriend and abruptly ended his relationship with Tanisha. The breakup devastated Tanisha, who wept openly to her family, struggling to process the sudden betrayal by someone she had trusted so implicitly. Yet, almost as quickly as he had broken off the relationship, Timothy realized he had made a profound error. Realizing what he had surrendered, he traveled to the university campus in College Station to surprise Tanisha, offering apologies and seeking reconciliation. Tanisha, possessing a forgiving nature and still harboring deep affection for Timothy, agreed to give the relationship another chance. When two people attempt to rebuild a relationship after a breach of trust, the foundational dynamic inevitably changes. Upon her return to campus, Tanisha continued to evolve as an independent adult. She made new friends, attended academic and social events, and began viewing her future through a wider lens. She was no longer the high school student who looked up to an older man for guidance. She was an expanding university scholar who viewed herself as his equal. Timothy, remaining in Houston and working in familiar routines, struggled with this shift. For an individual whose sense of security relies on maintaining control, a partner's growing independence can be perceived not as healthy personal development but as a direct threat. Subtle frictions began to emerge. During their conversations, Timothy's inquiries became more insistent. His need for reassurance morphed into possessive questioning. By March of 2007, Tanisha returned home to Houston for spring break. She was eager to relax, reconnect with childhood friends, and enjoy her time off from rigorous university coursework. Her schedule was full, including plans to attend a major music concert featuring Beyoncé with her female friends. Timothy, observing Tanisha's full social calendar, expressed frustration over having to schedule time to see her. In subtle ways, his comments reflected an underlying anxiety. He could feel her slipping beyond his sphere of control. During this same week, Tanisha's sister, Gayla, experienced a deeply disturbing dream. In the nightmare, Gayla saw Tanisha being assaulted by jealous individuals, resulting in her disappearance. When Gayla anxiously shared the dream with her sister, Tanisha smiled warmly and reassured her, promising that she was completely safe and that there was nothing to worry about. It was a comforting gesture from a loving sister intended to alleviate family anxiety. On Thursday, March 15th, 2007, Tanisha spent time hanging out with friends, including a young college acquaintance named Mark Marks. Mark was articulate, 19 years old, and shared Tanisha's university-oriented lifestyle. Unknown to Timothy, Tanisha and Mark had developed a mutual affection. Over the preceding weeks, Mark was aware of Timothy's existence in Tanisha's life, but Tanisha had indicated to Mark that she was preparing to step away from her past relationship and transition fully into a new chapter. In the early morning hours of Thursday, around 3 o'clock, Timothy picked Tanisha up to bring her back to his apartment north of Houston. While they were in transit, Tanisha's mobile phone rang. It was Mark Marks calling to check on her. Timothy observed the late-hour call with immediate suspicion. Upon arriving at his apartment, Timothy confronted Tanisha about who was calling her at 3 o'clock in the morning. Tanisha, exhausted and unwilling to enter into a heated argument at that hour, declined to discuss the matter, suggesting they sleep and talk about it later. The following days unfolded in silence. By Sunday, March 18th, 2007, Tanisha's family realized that no one had heard from her since Thursday. She had failed to meet her friends for the planned concert. Her mobile phone went straight to voicemail, and her usual check-ins with her mother had ceased entirely. Gayla called Timothy to inquire if he knew where Tanisha was. Timothy expressed apparent shock, stating that Tanisha had left his apartment on foot Thursday morning after a brief disagreement about her phone ringing and that he had not seen or heard from her since. On Monday, March 19th, 2007, Tanisha's family officially filed a missing persons report with local law enforcement. Missing persons investigations often begin in a state of deep uncertainty.
Detectives must
rapidly gather facts while carefully evaluating the credibility of everyone
involved.
Detective Sidney Miller and his investigative team immediately sought out the individuals who had last seen Tanisha alive. Timothy Shepard voluntarily came down to the station for questioning. Over the course of nearly 20 hours of detailed interviewing, Timothy maintained a consistent narrative. He explained that on Thursday morning, after waking up, he had again confronted Tanisha regarding the early morning call from Mark Marks. According to Timothy, Tanisha became frustrated, stated she did not want to engage in dramatic arguments, and walked out of his apartment on foot.
Timothy
insisted he loved Tanisha, had no idea where she went, and offered voluntary written consent for investigators to search his apartment. Detectives executed a search of Timothy's apartment. At that preliminary stage, visual inspection revealed no obvious physical evidence of a violent crime, no bloodstains, and no signs of a struggle, with no physical evidence linking Timothy to a crime and no legal grounds to detain him. Officers returned his keys, released him, and expanded their search parameters. The investigation then turned toward Mark Marks. Detectives located Mark and brought him in for questioning on Wednesday, March 21st, 2007. Mark was cooperative and open. He acknowledged his romantic interest in Tanisha and confirmed that Tanisha had expressed a desire to peacefully end her relationship with Timothy so they could be together exclusively.
Mark provided a
complete timeline of his whereabouts, explaining that he had traveled to nearby South Padre Island for a spring break gathering with friends during the time frame in question. Detectives thoroughly verified Mark's alibi through independent witnesses and electronic records, completely eliminating him as a
suspect.
Mark's distress over Tanisha's disappearance was genuine and palpable. With both primary men in Tanisha's life seemingly cleared, law enforcement faced a daunting possibility. Had Tanisha been abducted by a stranger while walking along the road after leaving Timothy's apartment? Detectives expanded their canvas, deploying search teams and canine units to search the heavily wooded, dark roads surrounding the apartment complex north of Houston. During this period, a local resident contacted law enforcement with a tip. The neighbor reported hearing what sounded like gunshots coming from the tree line near the complex on the night Tanisha vanished, followed by the sound of a vehicle accelerating away. Investigators immediately dispatched canine units to the location. The search dogs alerted on a scent deep in the woods, leading searchers to what turned out to be the decaying remains of a small animal.
Wow.
A relief in one sense, it left the mystery of Tanisha's whereabouts entirely unsolved. As family members and community volunteers organized independent search parties, knocking on doors and distributing flyers, neighboring residents near Timothy's apartment building began recalling unusual observations from the weekend. Following Tanisha's disappearance, multiple neighbors noted that Timothy had spent an extraordinary amount of time barbecuing on his apartment patio from Friday through the weekend. He operated 2 large outdoor grills simultaneously, producing thick, continuous plumes of dark smoke that eventually prompted concerned neighbors to dial 911, fearing a building fire. When firefighters and first responders arrived to manage the heavy smoke, Timothy explained that he was preparing a large quantity of meat for an upcoming church picnic, claiming he was cooking for approximately 150 to
200 people.
Firefighters accepted his explanation after observing meat soaking in a water-filled container inside the apartment. Shortly thereafter, another resident reported seeing Timothy scrubbing his outdoor patio with pure bleach. The chemical fumes were so intense that they burned the eyes of neighbors walking along the outdoor breezeway.
To law
enforcement, these combined reports created a profound shift in perspective. Continuous heavy smoke from dual grills, coupled with aggressive chemical scrubbing of an outdoor patio immediately following the disappearance of a missing person, was extraordinarily suspicious. Detectives re-interviewed Tanisha's family and close friends, asking deeper questions about Timothy's temperament. The picture that emerged was starkly different from the polite young man who fixed television sets. Friends revealed that Timothy had become increasingly possessive and controlling over the preceding months. He frequently harassed Tanisha with relentless text messages and phone calls when she was at university, sometimes driving down to campus unannounced to track her movements when she failed to answer immediately. More disturbingly, her sister Gayla disclosed that Timothy had previously used physical force against Tanisha during an argument, placing his hands around her neck to prevent her from leaving. Despite these alarming revelations, physical evidence remained elusive.
Law
Enforcement lacked the legal threshold to arrest Timothy for murder without concrete physical proof or a body. Tanisha's family, frustrated by the slow pace of legal procedure and terrified that her killer might escape justice, reached out to a well-known community activist named Quan Nell-X. Quan Nell-X had a long history of mediating sensitive cases within the local community. Unbeknownst to Tanisha's family, Timothy's own family had also contacted Quan Nell-X, seeking his assistance to protect Timothy from what they claimed was unfair police scrutiny. Facing conflicting accounts from both families, Quan Nell-X agreed to meet Timothy privately at his apartment to determine the truth. On Wednesday, March 21st, 2007, Quan Nell-X entered Timothy's apartment. Timothy appeared visibly shaken, nervous, and hypervigilant, expressing fear that law enforcement had planted listening devices in his home. Timothy requested that they speak inside the small bathroom, with the door closed. Inside the enclosed bathroom, Quan Nell-X looked Timothy directly in the eyes and asked him to be completely honest. He explained that if Timothy was innocent, he would stand by him, but if he was involved, it was time to speak the truth. Timothy lowered his head, unable to maintain eye contact. He began trembling and asked about the potential legal consequences he faced, specifically inquiring about the death penalty. When Quan Nell-X pressed him directly, Timothy broke down and confessed. He revealed that on Thursday morning, when Tanisha refused to discuss her relationship with Mark Marks and attempted to walk out of the apartment, he entered an overwhelming rage. Timothy admitted that he attacked Tanisha from behind as she reached for the door, strangling her until she stopped breathing. He then claimed that he carried her body outside and disposed of it in a commercial dumpster located in the rear parking lot of the apartment complex. Recognizing the gravity of the confession, Quan Nell-X immediately contacted investigator Sidney Miller. Within hours, Investigator Miller, his partner, Quan Nell-X, and a detained Timothy Shepard rode together in an unmarked police vehicle toward the apartment complex. Timothy sat in the back seat, providing quiet directions to the specific dumpster where he claimed to have placed Tanisha's body 6 days prior. Upon arriving at the rear parking lot, investigators approached the commercial dumpster and peered inside. To their intense dismay, the dumpster was completely empty. It had been cleared by municipal sanitation trucks days earlier as part of routine collection schedules. The realization was devastating. Municipal waste from that complex was regularly transported to a massive regional landfill servicing the greater Houston area. Law enforcement evaluated the feasibility of searching the landfill. Experts estimated that searching through tens of thousands of tons of compacted waste would cost upwards of $500,000, with virtually no guarantee of recovering human remains given the elapsed time and heavy machinery operation. In a poignant moment of profound dignity, Tanisha's family met with county officials and requested that public funds not be expended on an impossible search. choosing instead to focus on seeking legal justice for Tanisha, compounding the investigative challenge immediately following his transport to the police facility. Timothy exercised his legal right to counsel and revoked his verbal statement, refusing to speak further with investigators. Prosecutors faced a formidable legal obstacle, attempting to try a murder case without a body and without a recorded formal confession from the defendant. To build an unassailable case, forensic crime scene investigators returned to Timothy's apartment with advanced search warrants, conducting a meticulous, microscopic examination of the entire residence. Their diligence yielded critical physical evidence. Inside the kitchen sink's mechanical garbage disposal unit, forensic technicians recovered small human bone fragments and microscopic fragments of dental enamel. DNA testing definitively confirmed that the dental enamel matched Tanisha Stewart's unique genetic profile. Additionally, forensic teams searching the outdoor patio area discovered tiny, charred bone fragments near the location where Timothy's outdoor grills had been
positioned.
The horror of the crime crystallized. After strangling Tanisha, Timothy had taken unimaginable, gruesome steps to destroy her physical remains. Using the outdoor grills and mechanical disposal in a calculated effort to eliminate all evidence of his crime. A county grand jury formally indicted Timothy Shepard on charges of first-degree murder. The trial commenced on September 29, 2008 in a Harris County courtroom. Prosecutors faced the difficult task of presenting a complex circumstantial case to 12 jurors. They systematically presented the electronic phone records, the testimony of neighbors regarding the smoke and bleach, the forensic identification of Tanisha's dental enamel in the garbage disposal, and the powerful, riveting testimony of Quan Nell X detailing Timothy's voluntary confession. Furthermore, prosecutors called Timothy's cousin, Nicholas Shepard, to the
witness stand.
Nicholas delivered chilling testimony, revealing that months prior to the murder, Timothy had casually made a disturbing statement during a conversation, claiming that if a woman ever attempted to leave him, he would destroy her body completely so she could never be found. Faced with overwhelming circumstantial and forensic evidence, the defense made the tactical decision to put Timothy Shepard on the stand during the sentencing
phase.
Taking the witness stand, Timothy attempted to recast the narrative, claiming he acted in self-defense. He asserted that during their argument, Tanisha had picked up a small kitchen knife and swung it at him, causing him to react in a state of panic by grabbing her neck until she collapsed. However, during cross-examination, prosecutors relentlessly questioned Timothy regarding his actions after Tanisha died. When asked directly about placing her remains on the barbecue grill, Timothy offered a calm, precise correction that chilled everyone in the courtroom, stating that he had not used a standard barbecue pit, but had used a smoker. This stark lack of human empathy and cold rationality erased any lingering doubts among the jurors. After deliberating, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. They sentenced Timothy Shepard to 99 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the maximum penalty allowed by law. The resolution of the case brought legal finality, but it could never restore the bright future of Tanisha Stewart. Her tragedy serves as a solemn reminder of the profound dangers that can lurk behind possessive control disguised as affection. Tanisha was a young woman of extraordinary promise whose life was cut short by an individual who chose destruction over letting her soar. Her memory lives on in the hearts of her family, who demonstrated exceptional courage throughout a dark ordeal, standing as a testament to the enduring power of truth and love over unspeakable cruelty. Act 2. Beneath the Interstate. Justice is rarely a straight path. More often, it is a deliberate trek through a maze of human vanity, hidden lives, and misdirected motives. On the morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, the city of Raleigh, North Carolina, woke up to a crisp winter day as thousands of daily commuters navigated the westbound lanes of Interstate 540, the morning rush hour ground to an unexpected crawl near an overpass. Side-of-the-road disruptions are common on major urban thoroughfares, but as drivers passed a grassy embankment along the shoulder, they observed a scene that made their hearts freeze. Positioned in the grass was a human form, partially covered by a bright blue emergency tarp, surrounded by flashing red and blue lights from law enforcement vehicles. Among those commuters was a young man named Darren Curtis, driving to his job at approximately 7:45 in the morning. Darren slowed down along with the surrounding traffic, glancing at the blue tarp with a passing sense of somber curiosity. Continuing down the highway for approximately 1/2 mile, Darren's eyes caught sight of a white sedan parked quietly on the right shoulder with its hazard lights off. He recognized the vehicle immediately. It belonged to his 21-year-old wife, Latrice Curtis. A wave of intense panic overwhelmed Darren. He pulled his vehicle over, exited, and ran back down the shoulder of the interstate toward the crime scene area, where law enforcement officers were securing the perimeter. Approaching the officers in a state of visible distress, Darren explained that his wife's car was parked just down the road and that he could not reach her by phone. Detectives gently escorted Darren to a secure area and, after verifying identification, confirmed his worst nightmare: the deceased young woman beneath the tarp was indeed his wife, Latrice. Latrice Curtis was a vibrant, ambitious young woman who had grown up in a loving, protective family. As the only girl among several brothers, Latrice was cherished by her parents and siblings. She possessed an outgoing personality, an infectious laugh, and an innate ability to connect effortlessly with people from all walks of life. Despite her social popularity in high school, Latrice remained laser-focused on her academic and professional ambitions. During her freshman year at a local college, Latrice met Darren Curtis, a former National Guard soldier who was pursuing a degree in accounting. Darren was polite, mature, and soft-spoken. he quickly earned the respect and warm approval of Latrice's family. The young couple fell deeply in love, marrying after a year of dating. Latrice subsequently transferred to North Carolina Central University in nearby Durham to complete her degree in business administration. By January of 2008, they had been married for 9 months, sharing a quiet apartment and building what appeared to be a textbook foundation for a successful future together. Yet, on that cold January morning, that promising future came to a violent end. Major crime detectives from the Wake County Sheriff's Office immediately initiated a comprehensive crime scene investigation. The physical nature of the crime scene was appalling. Latrice had been subjected to an extraordinarily brutal physical assault. The medical examiner later documented upwards of 40 distinct stab and incised wounds concentrated around her face, neck, throat, and torso. Her carotid artery, jugular vein, and vocal cords had been severed. Despite the horrific nature of the attack, investigators observed clear evidence of fierce resistance. Latrice's defensive posture and the state of her hands indicated she had fought her attacker with exceptional courage. Forensic technicians meticulously bag her hands to preserve microscopic trace evidence under her fingernails. Notably, Latrice was still wearing her gold earrings and jewelry, and her purse remained intact, leading investigators to eliminate robbery as a potential primary motive. A half-mile down the interstate, forensic officers processed Latrice's white
sedan.
The interior of the vehicle showed signs of a violent struggle. The center console was fractured, and bloodstains were visible along the driver's side interior door panel. Crucially, forensic technicians recovered latent biological evidence, including a distinct foreign DNA sample from the vehicle's steering wheel, suggesting that someone other than Latrice had driven the car to its final resting location after the assault. Detectives initially questioned Darren Curtis at the sheriff's office. Darren was cooperative, permitting investigators to examine his body and arms for scratches or signs of physical struggle. None were found. His vehicle and the couple's apartment were searched with his full consent, yielding no blood, no physical evidence, and no signs of disruption.
Darren explained that on the
previous evening, Tuesday, January 29th, Latrice had called him around 10 o'clock in the evening to say she was staying late at university to study and would grab a bite to eat before heading home. Darren went to sleep around 11:30 when he woke up at 7 in the morning and found she had not returned. He assumed she had stayed overnight at her family's house, as she occasionally did when studying late. While Darren's narrative was plausible and supported by physical inspection, detectives maintained a standard analytical skepticism. In homicides of extraordinary violence, investigators look closely at intimate partners, as 40 stab wounds typically indicate intense personal rage rather than random stranger violence. However, the medical examiner's full autopsy report revealed a critical piece of physical evidence that completely shifted the direction of the investigation. Inside Latrice's body, forensic pathologists recovered an intact condom. Physical examination confirmed there were no trauma injuries consistent with forced sexual assault, indicating that Latrice had engaged in a consensual, intimate encounter shortly before her death. This discovery introduced profound questions. Who was Latrice meeting late at night? Did Darren know about a secret aspect of his wife's life, or was Latrice harboring secrets of her own? Detectives immediately subpoenaed the complete mobile phone records for both Latrice and Darren. Analysis of Latrice's call logs revealed a significant pattern. Late on the night of Tuesday, January 29th, continuing through midnight, Latrice had exchanged a flurry of frantic phone calls with a specific mobile number. Investigators traced the number to a 22-year-old university student named Stephen Randolph. Stephen Randolph was a prominent figure at North Carolina Central University. Standing over 6 feet tall, athletic, and handsome, Stephen was a star player on the university basketball team, actively pursuing a career in professional sports with aspirations of entering the National Basketball Association. On Friday, February 1st, 2008, 2 days after the discovery of Latrice's body, Stephen Randolph voluntarily walked into the Wake County Sheriff's Office. He was accompanied by his housemate, a 43-year-old local minister named Robert Reeves, who was widely known in the Durham community as Pastor or Bishop Reeves. Pastor Reeves presented himself as a supportive mentor protecting a promising young athlete. He explained to detectives that he had encouraged Stephen to come forward to assist law enforcement in clearing up any misunderstandings. Detectives ushered Stephen into an interrogation room while Pastor Reeves waited in a reception area. Initially, Stephen attempted to minimize his relationship with Latrice, claiming they were simply classmates who occasionally studied together. However, when detectives presented the physical autopsy findings and call logs, Stephen realized evasive answers were useless. He admitted that he and Latrice had been engaging in a secret, highly passionate romantic affair for several months. Stephen detailed the events of Tuesday evening, January 29th. He explained that Latrice had visited his residence around 8 o'clock in the evening. During their intimate encounter in his basement bedroom, the condom they used became lodged inside her body. They tried briefly to retrieve it but were unsuccessful. Latrice left his house around 10 o'clock in the evening, intending to remove it at home. Stephen stated that after she left, he drove to the apartment of his primary girlfriend, Velma Newton, arriving around 10:30. Over the next 2 hours, Latrice called his phone repeatedly in a state of intense distress, terrified that she might become pregnant as a result of the incident, which would ruin her marriage and destroy her personal life. Stephen insisted that he tried to calm her down over the phone, maintained that he never saw her again that night, and denied any involvement in her murder. Detectives rigorously evaluated Stephen's statement. A potential unplanned pregnancy represented a major complication for an aspiring professional athlete whose financial and career future depended on maintaining an unblemished public Profile. Could Stephen have met Latrice along Interstate 540 to silence her? Detectives interviewed Stephen's girlfriend, Velma Newton. Velma confirmed that Stephen had arrived at her apartment around 10 o'clock in the evening and stayed until roughly 1 o'clock in the morning. However, because the medical examiner placed Latrice's estimated time of death between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning, Stephen's timeline left a critical window unaccounted for. During her interview, Velma volunteered additional information that added a terrifying layer to the narrative. She revealed that over the preceding weeks, both she and Stephen had been receiving a barrage of anonymous, menacing phone calls from a blocked number. The caller warned them to terminate their relationships and threatened to destroy Stephen's basketball career. Furthermore, just days prior to the murder, Stephen had walked out to his car, parked outside his residence, and found that all 4 tires had been deliberately slashed. Investigators were now confronted with a complex matrix of potential motives and suspects: a betrayed husband, and panicked basketball player, an angry primary girlfriend, or an anonymous stalker. Then, a crucial break occurred from an unexpected source: a North Carolina state highway patrol trooper named Isaac Cooper reviewed local incident logs and contacted major crime detectives. Trooper Cooper reported that at approximately 1:30 in the morning on Wednesday, January 30th, the exact night of the murder, he was patrolling Interstate 540 when he observed a vehicle parked on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. Trooper Cooper pulled behind the vehicle to offer assistance, but found it abandoned. He ran the license plate through dispatch. The vehicle was a sedan, registered to Robert Lee Adams Reeves, Pastor Reeves. Trooper Cooper also noted that directly across the median on the opposite shoulder of the highway, he observed a white sedan with its hazard lights flashing, the exact location where Latrice's car was later processed. This revelation was profound. What was Pastor Reeves' personal vehicle doing abandoned at 1:30 in the morning on the exact stretch of highway where Latrice Curtis was being brutally murdered, directly across from her vehicle? Detectives immediately summoned Pastor Robert Reeves back to the sheriff's office for intensive questioning. Pastor Reeves was a charismatic, highly articulate figure in the local community. He operated a motivational speaking ministry and was regarded by many as a spiritual leader. He shared a residential house in Durham with his sister, renting out the basement apartment to Stephen Randolph for $300. A month after meeting the young athlete at a car wash months earlier, when questioned about his vehicle's presence on Interstate 540, Reeves denied having driven the car that night. He claimed he had spent Tuesday evening attending a church service, returning home around 11:30, and suggested that Stephen Randolph must have borrowed his car keys without permission. Detectives immediately cross-referenced his claims. They interviewed Reeves' sister, who had attended the exact same church service that evening. She explicitly stated that her brother was not at the church service. His alibi was a complete fabrication. Furthermore, as detectives observed Reeves during the interview, they noticed distinct physical injuries, fresh, deep scratches and abrasions along his hands and forearms. When asked to explain the marks, Reeves offered a clumsy explanation, claiming he had fallen while moving a heavy wooden desk with Stephen days earlier. Detectives immediately re-interviewed Stephen Randolph regarding the desk story. Stephen stated unequivocally that no such accident had occurred and that Reeves had sustained no injuries moving furniture. More critically, Stephen opened up about a deeply uncomfortable dynamic within the household. He disclosed that Pastor Reeves had developed a bizarre, intense obsession with him. Stephen described an incident where Reeves entered his basement room after Latrice had visited, making explicit sexual advances and offering to waive Stephen's monthly rent entirely if Stephen would engage in sexual acts with him. Stephen firmly rejected the offer. Subpoenaed telephone records provided absolute confirmation of the harassment. The anonymous, blocked threat calls made to Stephen and Velma Newton originated directly from Pastor Robert Reeves' personal mobile phone. The psychological reality was stark. Pastor Reeves was living a double life. Behind his public facade of spiritual leadership lay a history of repressed desires and predatory behaviors. Reeves had developed an overwhelming, unrequited obsession with Stephen Randolph. He viewed Stephen as his personal possession and grew consumed by intense, psychotic jealousy toward anyone who engaged intimately with the young athlete. When Latrice visited Stephen on Tuesday evening, Reeves observed her presence. Consumed by irrational rage and possessive jealousy, Reeves followed Latrice. When she left the house, he pursued her onto Interstate 540, signaled her to pull over onto the shoulder, possibly using his status as a trusted pastor or claiming Stephen needed help, and launched a furious, psychotic, physical attack inside her vehicle and along the embankment. Forensic science provided the final, indisputable truth. Advanced DNA analysis of biological evidence recovered from the interior of Latrice's vehicle revealed a profile matching Robert Lee Adams Reeves. The foreign biological material under Latrice's fingernails contained a mixture of DNA from both Stephen Randolph from their prior intimate encounter and major markers belonging to Robert Reeves, deposited as Latrice courageously fought for her life. On February 2, 2008, law enforcement officers formally arrested Robert Lee Adams Reeves, charging him with first-degree murder. The trial of Robert Reeves began on September 29, 2009. In a Wake County courtroom, prosecutors presented a comprehensive narrative, supported by physical evidence, cell phone records, trooper testimony, and DNA analysis. The defense attempted to argue that Stephen Randolph was the true killer and that Reeves' DNA had been transferred indirectly. However, experts dismantled the transfer theory, pointing out the substantial volume of Reeves' physical DNA present inside the vehicle and the documented physical scratches on his arms. After 2 days of deliberation, on October 9, 2009, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. The judge sentenced Robert Lee Adams Reeves to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The tragedy of Latrice Curtis stands as a sobering reflection on the hidden darkness that can exist behind pious public facades. Latrice was an innocent, ambitious young woman whose life was stolen by a man driven by unhinged obsession and deceit. Justice was ultimately served through the relentless work of law enforcement and forensic science, ensuring that a dangerous predator was permanently removed from society, honoring the memory of a bright life taken far too soon. Act 3. Silent Reckoning in Room 147. The human mind is a complex sanctuary capable of astonishing compartmentalization. When faced with catastrophic choices, some individuals retreat into elaborate webs of self-deception, convincing themselves that their actions were driven by forces beyond their control. In the quiet town of Little Elm, Texas, located near the serene shores of Louisville Lake, a tragedy unfolded that demonstrated how unbridled jealousy and emotional instability can dismantle lives in an instant. It began in the early morning hours of Saturday, December 11th, 2004, in the nearby city of Gainesville, Texas. At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, the night manager of a local commercial hotel received a frantic, slurred telephone call from a guest in room 147.
Concerned
for the guest's welfare, the manager walked down the interior corridor and knocked on the door, receiving no coherent response and finding the door secured from the inside with a heavy deadbolt. The manager summoned a maintenance worker to force the entry. Stepping into the darkened room, the men discovered a scene of chaotic despair. Lying crumpled in a fetal position on the floor beside the bed was a female guest, bleeding profusely from a gunshot wound to her head. The room was littered with empty alcohol containers and over-the-counter medication packaging. Positioned on the carpet inches from her hand was a .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun. The hotel staff immediately dialed 911. Emergency medical technicians arrived within minutes, stabilizing 36-year-old Denise Miller before rushing her to an intensive care trauma center. The bullet had penetrated her skull just above her eye, leaving her in critical, life-threatening condition. When police officers secured the hotel room, they recovered the .25 caliber handgun, along with a secondary weapon tucked inside a bag. A .40 caliber official law enforcement service pistol belonging to the Little Elm Police Department. A search of the vehicle parked outside revealed it belonged to Denise Miller. Local authorities quickly connected the discovery in room 147 to an active, urgent missing persons bulletin issued 24 hours earlier by the Little Elm Police Department. 2 individuals were reported missing: Denise Miller and her 37-year-old boyfriend, Little Elm Police Officer Wayne Irby. Wayne Irby was a highly respected 6-year veteran of the Little Elm Police Force. Standing tall, outgoing, and dedicated to community policing, Wayne was described by colleagues as someone who lived and breathed his law enforcement calling. He was a familiar, friendly figure on his beat, known for striking up warm conversations with residents and business owners alike. Denise Miller was equally well regarded in her community. Raised in Kansas City, Missouri, Denise was remembered by childhood friends as a sweet, bubbly, and deeply caring individual. She married her college sweetheart and had 2 children, Whitney and Walter. Following a divorce in 1995, Denise relocated to Little Elm, Texas, seeking a fresh start. She built a successful career with a regional beverage distributor, purchased a beautiful home, and devoted herself to raising her children. In 2003, Wayne Irby knocked on Denise's door during a routine patrol after noticing her garage door had been left open. The chance encounter sparked an immediate connection. Wayne was charming and attentive. Denise was attractive and warm. They began dating exclusively, and Wayne rapidly became a positive, fatherly presence in the lives of Denise's 2 children. However, beneath the idyllic exterior of their romance, deep emotional fault lines were present. Wayne was naturally charismatic and frequently engaged in friendly chatter with women in the community. Denise, struggling with profound insecurities and underlying trust issues, began suspecting that Wayne was engaging in romantic infidelities. Her jealousy gradually evolved into hypervigilance. She questioned his movements, monitored his daily routine, and called his mobile phone repeatedly throughout his work shifts. The tension escalated dramatically in December of 2003. Denise arrived unannounced at a rental house Wayne owned, observing a female acquaintance's purse on the table through a window. When Wayne opened the door, a heated physical confrontation ensued. Both suffered minor physical injuries, with Wayne sustaining visible scratches and a black eye. Denise initially filed a domestic assault report with law enforcement, but subsequently withdrew it, acknowledging that she had been the primary physical aggressor during a jealous rage. Despite brief separations, the couple repeatedly attempted to reconcile, driven by mutual affection and a desire to preserve their shared home. In 2000, they purchased a home together. However, cohabitation amplified their core incompatibilities. By late November of 2004, after Denise unexpectedly lost her corporate employment, the financial and emotional strain reached a breaking point. Wayne concluded that the relationship was unsustainable and communicated his definitive decision to move out permanently. On Friday, December 10, 2004, Officer Wayne Irby failed to appear for his scheduled 6 o'clock morning shift briefing at the Little Elm Police Department. Unannounced absenteeism was completely uncharacteristic of Wayne, triggering immediate concern among his fellow officers. Around noon, police officers executed a welfare check at the home Wayne shared with Denise. The residence was locked and no vehicles were present. Detectives located Denise's teenage daughter, Whitney, at her high school. Whitney reported that her mother had not returned home Thursday night, but recalled receiving a brief, unusual phone call from Denise around midnight, during which her mother stated she was running errands, and repeatedly emphasized how much she loved the children, a tone Whitney found deeply unsettling. Recognizing that both Wayne and Denise were missing, officers expanded their search. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Wayne's patrol partner, Officer Jerry Walker, along with Officer James Wynn, traveled to a small rental property Wayne owned across town. Obtaining a key from the property manager, the officers entered the residence. Inside the kitchen, officers observed Wayne's personal fanny pack and mobile phone resting on the counter. Moving cautiously down the interior hallway, Officer Wynn rounded a corner and stopped cold. Lying face down on the floor was Officer Wayne Irby. He had sustained a single, fatal gunshot wound to the center back of his head. There were no signs of a physical struggle, no defensive marks, and no evidence of forced entry. His official service belt was hanging neatly on a nearby wall, but his .40 caliber service pistol was missing from its holster. The crime scene presented a devastating reality for the department. Their fellow officer had been executed from behind in a cold, deliberate manner. Investigators from the Denton County Sheriff's Office and the Texas Rangers immediately assumed command of the homicide investigation. Given the complete absence of forced entry and the deliberate execution-style wound, investigators focused their attention squarely on Denise Miller. A forensic search of the residence Denise shared with Wayne yielded crucial evidence. In the master bedroom, investigators discovered a handwritten note from Denise expressing deep emotional despair, stating that she could no longer tolerate the emotional pain she was experiencing. More significantly, forensic technicians processing the kitchen area at Wayne's rental home discovered a second handwritten note resting on an island counter. The note, written in Denise's distinct handwriting, contained a direct confession. "I am sorry. I took both of our lives. Please contact our moms." The investigative narrative solidified. Denise had traveled to Wayne's rental home armed with a firearm, executed Wayne from behind after he confirmed his decision to end the relationship, retrieved his service pistol, and fled the scene with the intention of ending her own life. Hours later, the bulletin yielded the recovery of Denise in room 147 of the Gainesville Hotel. Forensic examination of the hotel room explained the mechanics of her botched suicide attempt. Investigators discovered that Denise had initially tried to use Wayne's .40 caliber service pistol to shoot herself, but had accidentally loaded the ammunition magazine backwards, causing the mechanism to jam. She then retrieved a .25 caliber pistol registered to her stepfather and fired a single shot into her skull. While Denise survived the gunshot wound, the physical and cognitive damage was severe. She suffered partial paralysis, loss of vision in one eye, and significant neurological trauma. Texas Ranger Tracy Murphy conducted an audio-recorded interview at Denise's hospital bedside days after the incident. During the recorded exchange, Denise spoke in slurred, fragmented sentences. She acknowledged being present at Wayne's rental home on Thursday, but adamantly denied shooting him, claiming total amnesia regarding the moments surrounding his death. When Ranger Murphy explicitly informed her that Wayne was dead, Denise exhibited apparent shock, insisting he was still alive. A third, longer handwritten note recovered from her hotel purse introduced a subtle legal complication. Amidst expressions of guilt and references to religious commandments, Denise had written a single line asserting that the shooting of Wayne had been an accident and that she had panicked and fled. This line formed the core foundation of the defense strategy when the murder trial commenced on July 10, 2006, in a Denton County courtroom. Defense attorneys presented Denise as a frail, wheelchair-bound woman who had suffered a catastrophic psychotic break. They argued that she had carried the .25 caliber handgun to Wayne's residence merely to threaten suicide as a desperate plea to prevent him from leaving, and that the weapon had discharged accidentally during a tense emotional exchange. However, prosecutors systematically dismantled the accident theory through precise forensic science and physical evidence. Ballistics experts from the State Crime Lab demonstrated that the .25 caliber handgun possessed a heavy mechanical trigger pull requiring 4.5 to 5 pounds of deliberate finger pressure to fire, completely ruling out an accidental hair trigger discharge. Furthermore, medical examiners emphasized the physical trajectory of the bullet. Wayne was shot directly in the exact center of the back of his head while facing away from his attacker. An accidental discharge during an emotional face-to-face argument cannot result in a pristine, execution-style entry wound to the direct rear of a victim's skull. Finally, prosecutors highlighted Denise's deliberate post-shooting conduct. Rather than calling emergency services or attempting to render medical aid if an accident had occurred, Denise systematically picked up the spent casing, stole Wayne's service weapon, locked the residence behind her, wrote confession notes, and fled to a distant hotel to consume alcohol and medication. The jury evaluated the evidence with stark clarity. On July 12, 2006, after less than 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. During the sentencing phase, prosecutors argued that despite her current physical disability, which was entirely self-inflicted, Denise had committed a calculated, violent act that stole the life of a dedicated public servant and father. The jury sentenced Denise Miller to 62 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The tragic case of Denise Miller and Wayne Irby illustrates the destructive culmination of untamed emotional obsession. Denise was a woman who allowed insecurity and possessive jealousy to erode her judgment, ultimately choosing destruction over acceptance when a relationship ended. Officer Wayne Irby lost his life while attempting to peacefully navigate a difficult personal separation. Across all three cases, Tanisha Stewart, Latrice Curtis, and Wayne Irby, the common thread remains clear. True affection seeks the flourishing and freedom of the other person, while possessive control seeks ownership at any cost.
Justice,
In these cases, was achieved through the meticulous dedication of law. Enforcement, forensic scientists, and courageous witnesses who brought truth to light out of dark shadows. Their collective efforts ensure that the memories of the victims are honored, providing a lasting testament to the enduring triumph of truth, accountability, and justice. Their romance was a textbook example of a young co-ed with a promising future, holding her entire life ahead of her, matched with a dashing young man who swore to love her until death did they part. They seemed exceptionally happy living together, honeymooning, and enjoying all the traditional milestones of early married life. There were no apparent problems, no visible issues, and no outward signs of trouble. Yet, less than 1 year after exchanging their sacred vows, an inexplicable crime shattered their reality beyond repair.
she had been stabbed.
The scene was described by first responders as devastating. Why her? Why anybody? But the lingering question for those who knew her was definitely, why her? To unmask the person responsible, law enforcement officers would find themselves navigating a twisted path filled with sexual obsession, deep betrayal, and layers of deceit. The relationship had been passionate, intense, and ultimately dangerous.
It was
The sort of tragic narrative where observers might remark that truth is stranger than fiction, and that one simply could not invent such a scenario.
at the
Center of the investigation was a killer driven by extreme rage, perhaps even a deranged or psychotic state of mind. The morning of Wednesday, January 30th, 2008, began at 7:30 in the morning. It was a cold winter day in Raleigh, North Carolina.
as
The sun rose over the city. Morning commuters spotted something alongside Interstate 540 that immediately captured their attention for all the wrong reasons. Several drivers heading west noticed what appeared to be a body lying off to the side of the road. As emergency dispatchers received a flurry of 911 calls, first responders raced to the scene. There, they found a young woman lying in the
grass.
Tragically, assistance came far too late. She had already passed away. The initial assumption made by authorities likely involved the tragic possibility of a pedestrian accident, perhaps someone struck by a passing vehicle in the early hours of the morning. However, upon closer inspection of the woman's body, police officers quickly realized this was no
ordinary accident.
She had not been struck by a car. She had been stabbed. Investigators could immediately see that she had suffered multiple